Welcome to another video. In this video we take a look at the electronics on this 1939 Columbus Model 65 vintage radio.
Alright, let's throw some electrons at that, see what happens.
Welcome back. In this video we have a special guest, YouTuber Vintage Radio Steve, who's come along to help us out with this vintage radio. Thanks for coming along, Steve.
You're very welcome.
Now I know you're a bit of a vintage radio buff. Tell us about your website and YouTube channel.
Well, the website came about because years and years ago I found a vintage radio for sale on Trade Me and I thought, I can't buy it, it's in Auckland and I was in Christchurch at the time, but I'd like to buy it. And so I saved the pictures of it, and then I had those pictures and I saw another one for sale. I thought I should save those pictures, and then a couple of years went by and all of a sudden I had a terabyte of pictures of old radios and no real idea what to do with them. In another life I'm a software engineer, so I thought, well, maybe I'll make a website. There we go. That's
and
it's not quite that simple, but that's very much how it came about.
And that's how I sort of met up with you too. When I purchased this radio, the Bell Colt and the Ultimate radio, I actually just referenced the website because I didn't have a clue what these models were. And you saw that video, and
yeah, that popped up on my feed. Thanks, algorithm.
Yeah,
and so I watched it, and I remember sitting on the couch watching it and going, "Hey, Nicky, look."
Yeah,
I'm on internet without being on the internet. So that was a bit novel that someone, like, I know people use it, but it was nice to see that people who have, like, the people that use it are typically the people in the vintage radio society and those who really like radios. So just knowing that people can find it was a really nice thing to hear.
Now I also hear that you're writing a book about Columbus radios. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
I wish it would end. Please make it stop. Yeah, that's been a bit of an all-consuming passion for the last couple of years at least. I really like Columbus, and I like the radios made by Radio Corp that made this one, and through a couple of chance meetings I met some ex-staff members of that company, which has been gone since 1960 or thereabouts, and got some really cool inside information and some photos and documents, and then I started researching in the National Library and archives and in museums, and got to the point where I had so much information and I was really loving all this stuff I knew about the company, and then I realized that I'm actually the only person who knows all this, and that terrified me, because if I get hit by a bus, if someone's lucky, they might research all this information or it'll be lost forever. So I started writing it down, and with the blessing of a wonderful old guy called John Shears, who worked there from 1945 and is up in Auckland, he helps me out with notes on stuff. I have started putting a book together, and hopefully by March next year, that's the deadline I've set myself at this point.
Right.
But then I also said I'd be finished this year, so we'll see how it goes.
Definitely looking forward to that book when it comes out.
The book is coming.
Yeah. And speaking of Columbus radios, what's the plan of attack on this electronics on this radio?
Well, like most old radios, the first thing we'll need to do is replace all the capacitors. Those are electrical components that have a life, and that life is generally 15-20 years at best. These old radios create a lot of heat, and heat accelerates that failure of the componentry.
Right.
So we'll replace those if we get a chance, because we are going to be pressed for time a little bit. If we get a chance, we'll have a look at resistor values and just make sure that those components are okay. We'll check for other things, and then I think we'll just fire it up and see what happens.
Okay, sounds like a good plan. Okay, well, we'll make a start on this radio, and thanks again for coming along.
You're very welcome. Let's get stuck in. Alright, welcome back to another video. This one is a bit special. because I drove for about 6 hours and spent 4 hours on a ferry in 3-metre swells to get to this one. This one is in Wellington. So none of you will probably recognise this radio because it's out of the cabinet. This is a Columbus Model 65 and it belongs to John. John bought this radio a while back and it's got a kind of a cool backstory. One owner from New, apparently. It's lived in Wellington all its life by the looks of the station IDs. So it's a Columbus Model 65, came out in 1939. It's got the same visual eyes as the spiral dial model. These mechanical eyes that basically actuate off little cams here. They're a bit of a pain. The grease in them gets all hard and horrible and crusty, and so they're going to need a clean up at some point. That's not my problem today. John can deal with that one. But what we're going to do is make it work. So I'll insert some footage here.
So all I'm hearing is a hum in the background, slight bit of static, but unfortunately this one looks like it's a non-goer.
So you can hear the hum that has. The radio is definitely in need of a service. So we're going to go through and recap and fire it up and see if we can get it to go. I've got an old Magic Eye I found in my stash, which has a note on it saying quarter bright, so hopefully we'll be able to get some lovely green glow out of a Magic Eye for it as well, and make it sing again. So here's the 10-inch Radio Corp speaker. Radio Corp made these. They were apparently the first commercial manufacturer of speakers in New Zealand, and they made 6-inch, 8-inch and 10-inch models. The 10-inch models sound fantastic typically, so I would expect this to sound really, really good. We shall see. They're an electromagnetic speaker, so this big bell on the back contains a large bobbin of wire which gets energized by the power supply from the radio, making a speaker magnet. What we're going to do is start a recap and see if we can get the set running. Alright, let's get stuck in. So first thing, we'll just get this Magic Eye out of the way so we don't break that. Now typically I would take the bracket for the Magic Eye off. This one's loose. Otherwise you tip it upside down and you bend it. Same goes with these edge lighting assemblies. If they come off, best to take them off. If not, put a block of wood so that you're not resting on these, otherwise you'll end up damaging them. So here we are underneath. John made a startling discovery when he flipped this over for the first time. Those of you who know will know not to put any body parts near this. John found some body parts near this. Body parts of a rodent that is no more. There's a couple of chew marks on this electrolytic, but not too much other rodent damage that could have happened. I suspect what's happened is the mouse has got in here, chewed on that, walked over here, tried to chew on that, and then became an ex-mouse. So fortunately that's all been cleaned out before we got here. Thanks, John.
No worries.
So we can just get in here and start replacing some caps. So first thing I'm going to do is get this set up so that it's sitting nice and comfortably to work on. And I will get some parts out. So 0.01s, 0.004, which is the tone cap, a couple of 15 mic, 500 volts. We've got some 25 mic, 50 volt or cathode bypass, and lots of 0.05s. And these are my big 0.05s I got sent that are completely useless to me, but they'll be perfect in here because the 0.05s will be big. To get one, I'm wondering if I go this way, put it under the tuning gang, and that might be all we need. Whoa, look at that.
Perfect.
Those were made for it. Alright, so let's talk about the fun we're going to have. Because this radio has push buttons, it's got all these presets which have these long shafts that run right out the back of the chassis so that the presets can be set without having to pull the chassis out. That would be fine, but I can count at least 4 or 5 capacitors that are buried down underneath there. That's going to be fun. Is what it is. We'll get them and we'll replace them. We've got caps pretty much everywhere. I'm going to start over here in the power supply, because if we can get these big ones out and replaced with smaller ones, that's going to give us a wee bit more room to move. This has had some work reasonably recently. A Mayak cap, these if I remember correctly, Mayak is a Chinese manufacturer, so that's probably reasonably recent. Underneath it we've got a wonderful Hunt's capacitor. Hunt's the company known for making dead short capacitors. That's definitely going to have to go. Well, they're all going to have to go. So we'll start over the side and get the bulky components out of the way, and then we'll just work our way this way. No, these are our bypass caps for the first audio and output. So these are 25 mic 40 volt. Those are getting replaced with these, which are around about the same capacity and 10 volts more capacity, or 10 volts more voltage handling. So what a difference a few years makes, eh? Technological. So these are the earth ends, and then that's nice and warm. So important to get the electrolytic capacitor around the right way. This tiny little cap has a stripe on one side with little negative symbols in it. That is the negative side of the cap. So it's typical to have a stripe on the negative leg of an electrolytic capacitor. That has to go to ground, the other side to the cathode. The predominant thing that goes wrong in these sets is the capacitors. So this is a big example, but these tubular capacitors were made of paper and foil. The paper breaks down, the foil shorts out, and they start to pass voltages that they shouldn't be passing. If you understand AC and DC, that'll make more sense, but just understand that these are designed to block a certain type of voltage, and when they get old, they no longer do that to varying degrees, and that causes anywhere from distorted audio to hum to the set just not working to small explosions that take parts that have been unobtainium for 50 or 60 years and turn them to dust. Quite often see on vintage radio forums where people get really bent out of shape when they see what they consider to be shoddy work in a radio, and it makes me chuckle, particularly when people are looking at radios that were serviced in maybe the 50s. They go, that's not a very tidy restoration. Well, it wasn't a restoration. These guys were servicemen. They were fixing a radio to put food on their table, to feed their family. And like anything when it's a job, it's a numbers game. People didn't pay people to restore radios back then, they paid them to fix them. And so there's nothing wrong with that job they did. It's just that the expectations of people these days are that partly a bit higher, and partly that the status of these old radios has changed. It's not a utilitarian piece of household equipment anymore. It's a treasured antique, so people expect a bit more. But don't be too hard on our old servicemen that did these jobs perfectly adequately for the day. And don't be too hard on me doing this job perfectly adequately. Ish. So if you haven't done this before, heat shrink tubing, when it's hot, you crimp it in a pair of pliers. It will actually seal up at the end. Okay, now we're getting into the tricky ones. John, you can do these. So you can see the problem we're going to have here. There's a terminal point right there.
Yep.
And there's another terminal point right there. And those two caps there, that one and that one, are off those two terminals. One of them goes down to an earth lug, that'll be easy to get to. Another one goes to another terminal there, which is probably the easiest of the three. That's a 0.05. So I've left the tails of the cap. So what I'm going to do, some people in the vintage radio world love these pigtails. So what I'm going to do is just basically kill some little pigtails. And if I haven't gone too short, I'll poke that onto the... I've gone too short. That's funny.
About a couple of millimetres too short, so close.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because that's an earth point. I've got another earth tag right down here, so what I could do is actually just go straight off there onto that earth tag. But I'm also glad I didn't just send you a bag of caps and say, here John, you do it. Because that would have been really mean.
We may not have a radio anymore.
A good video of swearing, methinks. If you look in these sets, they're built in what's known as the dead bug style, where components have leads flying all over the place. Component leads are reasonably thick and self-supporting, and they were basically designed like this. So whilst it doesn't look pretty, it worked back in the day and will work today. One thing you do want to be reasonably careful of is these modern caps. They're a polyester film, they're not paper. So a very thin plastic film between the foil layers. And if you get them too hot, you melt that plastic film and you basically replicate the damage that's happened over 40-50 years with the original caps. So you want to be reasonably quick when you're putting heat on them. Or you may have seen me use in the past, I've got a little set of pliers, but they're just tiny and they just clip onto things. They act as a little heat sink. You put them on the component side of the wire so they draw the heat away before it goes up into the cap. Alright, next one's going to be this green one down here. I think we're going to try and... Do you want to have a go at this one, John?
Yeah, I'll have a go.
So there's a red wire, or red spaghetti sleeve on the wire to there. So I'll cut the wire there, just at the end of the cap, and then cut the wire at the end of the cap on the other end.
Okay.
Then retrieve the cap so we can check what value it is. Looks like a 0.1, which I'll have some 0.1s there. And then what we're going to try and do is do a little pigtail onto there and onto there if we can.
Right.
When you do that,
Okay.
I'll have a crack at that. Right, so another one down under there, and that one will be much easier to replace.
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad there, does it?
Because what we'll do... What? Really? Okay, so this is a fun problem that you have where the cutters won't fit in unless they're fully squeezed up, but when they're fully squeezed up you can't cut the wire. So these Ducon caps, to the best of my knowledge, certainly in this era, never ever used by Radio Corp. In fact, that one there says Radio Corporation of New Zealand because that's a genuine factory one that they made themselves.
Do you think it's possible they've fitted this one later on in its life?
Yeah, it's been done as a service job. So someone's already had the fun of getting into these awkward spots. Alright, that's that one done. That's a Phillips cap, so that one's probably okay. We've got 3 left that I can see. 2 green ones here out in the open, and one tucked away under there. Not really in the open at all. Oh no, there's another one down here. Okay, 4. Right, so the one cap that I had sitting out to put on but didn't put on. Alright, power cord. What you would normally do is have a cable clamp on modern appliance, and that's the correct way of doing it to code. What they used to do was a knot. And I don't have a cable clamp. We may have to go old school. This one didn't even have a cable clamp, it was just soldered in. The earth wire was actually holding it. Speaker is in. Alright, let's throw some electrons at that, see what happens. Bright flare and dying down. Pilot light is lit. The other one is probably kaput. Volume's on full. Tone probably won't matter where it's at. I would expect to hear some crackling. And I would expect at least some hum. Do some DC voltage checks. So I think what was happening is it took an awfully long time to warm up, which is unusual. But I think also what was happening was the voltage was not quite high enough to feed stuff through the dim bulb. So the dim bulb allowed us to check that nothing was shorted, which is good, so it's done its job, but now it's out of the way. Right, the other thing we'll try, the magic eye.
To hear songs that you can sing along to.
So
Dial.
it's not super bright, but it works.
There's something, yeah.
And in the dark, that'll look, once you've got both bulbs going and these two mechanical eyes working,
Yeah.
it'll look quite flash.
Yeah. Oh, that looks good already. Yeah, really pleased with that.
Good. Done. Sold.
Radio saved as well. That was a $15 radio and it could have ended up in the bin if I didn't buy them. So,
And I think it's cool also that this actually has a story. You know, it's a one owner from New. The guy had it since he was a kid.
yeah, and he worked for Concert Radio. When I went round to pick them up, he was an older guy. He was sitting in the chair, but he didn't say much, but his wife told me the story about the radio. So no, I was really pleased to get those. Yeah.
And you know, it's clearly been looked after. It's a tidy radio, so good to save it. Now you get to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
now you get to do all the tidy up bits that we didn't get to.
Thank you very much.
Don't thank me, thank the Earth's gravitational pull on the moon.
Well, that brings us to the end of another video. Thanks to Vintage Radio Steve, we've successfully fixed the electronics on this vintage Columbus radio. Stay tuned for the next video as we just go through and tidy up a few things on this vintage radio. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.
Welcome back. In this video we have a special guest. Welcome back. In this video. Okay, that's
you can
out.
see why.
It's done. Yeah.
Till the next one.
Yeah. Welcome back. In this video we have a special guest, YouTuber Vintage Radio Steve, who's come along to help us out with this vintage radio.